Hmm.
Woohoo!
What about the value of loyalty?
Loyalty.
Yeah, loyalty.
That's interesting. It's like staying with someone or something because you have in the past, or like they've treated you well in the past.
Right, so it's putting a great deal of value in previous connections and relationships.
Yeah,
Right?
essentially.
Right? And so it's a value, right? Like
Yeah, that's a value.
That's valuing something like that. So talk to me. Do you feel like conservatives or liberals value loyalty?
Like, that's not a value we've talked about before at all. But seeing that conservatives are inherently traditional, I would say that for conservatives, loyalty is a much bigger value.
Talk to me about a liberal's conception of loyalty.
Well, I think that liberals are obviously very progressive, so their idea of loyalty, if it serves you well in the past and it still like works today, then we should like keep it around and still remain loyal to it. But like, if it doesn't work anymore, or if we're just realizing now that it maybe never worked and that it's not helpful to us in the current time and age, then we should reject it and move forward with better things.
The way you describe that really is loyalty is not valued at all. From
Yeah.
that perspective.
Yeah.
So, in some level, I mean, it seems like you feel like there's actually a really powerful difference in the way that liberals and conservatives value loyalty.
Yeah. Well, just in the way that I was thinking of it in like broad terms. Family values are a very conservative thing. Conservatives value family as in like your parents, like they're the people that raised you, so like they can do no wrong. Liberals are less loyal in terms of the family because liberals think more in terms of family relationships being like a two-way street and are more aware of when they're being mistreated and when it's better to cut off that relationship. While conservatives are very loyal in keeping those family relationships no matter what.
Well, so you think that there's pretty strong distinction in terms of how liberals and conservatives view loyalty to family. So what about loyalty to traditions or ideas?
I think conservatives are going to be much more respectful of their traditions and their like values that they grew up with, and then liberals are going to move on and reevaluate those. And like, if they're bad, get rid of them. If they're good, keep them. Like what I said before.
What about like to their home or country?
I think conservatives at our whole are way more patriotic and like protective of their country and defensive and like wanting to always compliment the country and like not acknowledging as many of its faults or claiming or saying that those faults are like minor in comparison to the overall good of it. Liberals are much more critical of the country as a whole and much more willing to lift up those faults and point them out and be like, hey, these need to be fixed because these are really big problems.
Right, so I think, this loyalty thing seems to sort of permeate all sorts of levels.
Yeah.
You could be in the same family, and one kid could grow up deeply conservative, valuing the traditions of his family, and one kid could completely reject them. And they go down different paths, and one's a conservative, then one's a liberal. What's the difference? Who are these people? What's happening here?
Like, the whole thing is that liberals are progressive and conservatives are traditional. It's really interesting how people that come from completely the same backgrounds, like the same family even, can grow up to be such different people. When we're thinking about the values of liberals and conservatives, loyalty is a really important one, and it really like builds off of what other values they managed to hold. Because for the difference between liberals and conservatives, I feel like it's more like embracing and rejecting like the things that you've always known. And conservatives are much more implanted in their worldview in what they've always known, and liberals are much more likely to reevaluate their beliefs.
And it seems to me that this is like a deep personality trait. Like, I think that that sort of liberal, like, questioning and examining sort of mindset that you're talking about almost takes a glee in undermining some of those traditional values.
Yeah.
Right? It almost like it takes joy in sort of doing that.
Yeah.
And I think the conservative mindset really finds that sort of that playfulness and that sort of irreverence. Irreverent.
Yeah.
Right? It's offensive. And it's disrespectful.
Yeah, it's like almost in terms of Christianity and in terms of religion, conservatives practically worship these traditions and claim that because they've been around for so long, they must be good. You have to respect them. You have to treat them with the due respect with what they're worth. And liberals completely challenge this mindset by saying, this isn't worth anything.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it feels to me that somehow we're getting back to the way that human beings decide what to believe.
Yeah.
Once again, we're kind of getting back into sort of an epistemology.
Yeah.
Question. Is this all connected?
Clearly there is like this inherent difference between conservative and liberal views. It's a very ingrained thing.
Our differences in political views are a symptom.
Yeah.
Of something deeply different about us. What is it? Where is it coming from?
Conservatives value traditions as if they age like wine. Like they're somehow inherently better because of how they've been respected in the past. I understand the logic there. It's like they value these beliefs because they've been valued for so long. They must be good because like if they must have worked in the past, they must be working now because they've worked for so long. Then why wouldn't they? And they fail to realize and to acknowledge that for some beliefs that might be true, but by claiming that there is some sort of betterness to beliefs based on how old they are, instead of based on what beliefs they actually are. Like, beliefs are complicated. Like, beliefs are different. There are infinite beliefs to infinite situations. And it could be just as true that, like, well, some belief could be great and could have been passed on from generation to generation because it has no faults. Another belief could have actually never worked at all. And by valuing beliefs not for what they are, but for their age or what other people value them, you sort of forget about what beliefs even are in general. And it leads you to having some really untrue perspectives of reality, because you're not seeing beliefs as beliefs. You're seeing beliefs as sort of a badge of honor, a trophy passed down from generations. You're seeing beliefs as part of your identity.
You said that the conservative position would be to hold on to beliefs that have worked before because they've worked before, so why change them?
Yeah.
And I think there's something to that, right? I think it's a logical description of what it is, but I don't feel like that's really what happens. I don't feel like there's like some sort of like computer analysis of that, you know, and it's like, oh, it's more likely to continue because it's happened before. That doesn't feel like a deeply conservative value to me. I feel like it's more personal than that.
Yeah. Valuing beliefs because, like, you've held them before and, like, so there must be something good in them. That's the argument that conservatives might use to defend their beliefs and why they're so traditional. The way conservatives hold beliefs is all based on emotions. And that's not good. Like, they think because it's a part of my identity, it's part of my family's identity, and by challenging these beliefs and by trying to reject these beliefs or move on or form new ones, it's like I'm challenging or rejecting my family. But by viewing beliefs through an emotional perspective instead of through a logical one, it leads to being unable to accurately view the world.
To talk about this a little bit, let's step back once again, though, and consider why we hold beliefs. I think that most of us don't hold the beliefs because we've run the numbers.
No.
We've done the work, right? I think that beliefs, as we've talked about, are based on us trusting other people.
Yeah.
And so it's all about who you trust.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a fundamental difference in methodology between who liberals and maybe conservatives trust. Conservatives, I think, are more likely to trust people they feel close to. Right? Like, that's
like their family.
Family, number one. And, church and community. And people who are like them. Liberals, if you really find, sort of the scientific methodology, right? Sort of the core of belief, or the foundation for, what you believe and what you don't. I think that it's deeply competitive based on the idea itself. Right? It doesn't care who said it. It cares what was said.
Yeah.
Those are two very different ways of coming at the world. I mean, is that it? That faith, that loyalty, that love. Do you know what I mean? And I almost feel like it's weird to say in the way that you're describing it that the conservatives on some level base what they believe on who they love.
Yeah.
And liberals are kind of a little bit like, I think those two things are really separate. In fact, I might even choose who I love based on what they believe.
Yeah.
That's just a different way of looking and viewing the world and what you value. And I think that it can, account for a lot of these differences in a lot of these political positions. But that's kind of a weird way to think about it, I think.
Yeah. I don't think people really like getting down to these differences because it really forces them to acknowledge themselves in a sort of clinical way. Instead of being okay, well, this isn't just for conservatives, this is for both sides. It's by digging down to who you are, you're sort of acknowledging that you don't just think these things because they're right. There's reasons behind them. And by looking at the reasons behind your beliefs and values and who you are as a person, it makes it feel less like there's sort of an inherent good in you or inherent beliefs or reasons are right in you. And it's just sort of making it out to be scientific and getting your being, your soul, your mind, yourself not to be as inherent as it seems.
I think in analyzing our motivations and why we are what we are makes us seem less important than we like to feel like we are.
Yeah.
It feels a little inhuman.
Yeah.
In some ways.
Exactly.
When we talk about liberals and conservatives, we're talking about people who are comporting themselves from a very early point on in a very different way towards the world.
Yeah.
Right? And one is based on loyalty and trust and believing those with whom you are close.
Yeah, in love.
In love.
And then liberals sometimes base who they love on those people's beliefs.
Well, and it goes, obviously it's a cycle, so it goes both ways eventually. But But I think that surely it's more of that sort of liberal mentality to reject the parents and say, fuck school and, whatever else I'm being taught, and I'm going to figure out my own way.
Yeah.
And because it's important that I figure it out. right? It's got to make sense more than it's got to be, hey, it came from people I love.
Yeah.
This is something that's like that a lot of people don't. I don't know. Have you heard that? Do you hear people talk about this?
No.
Like liberals and conservatives this way?
No.
Not really, right? It's not on the morning talk shows, right? Well, that's because you're more of a love-based epistemology as opposed to a information-based epistemology.
Yeah, and part of the reason is like what we said before, like because people don't like thinking about themselves in that way.
Right. We like to think of ourselves as sort of like integrated information processor who's making rational decisions all the time based on what's the right decision, and
we think of ourselves as people instead of collections of beliefs and values passed on by society.
Well, yeah, we like to, and I think that all ties back to a little bit. We like to think of ourselves as being very important.
Yes.
And I think that when you begin to break things down, you find out that we're a little bit more arbitrary than we think we are.
We hope that you enjoyed that video, and if you did, please consider checking out the next one in the series.
Or some of our other series on philosophy and life.
We upload videos every Friday, so don't forget to like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. See you next week.